Think of how different the world would be if we all were able and nurtured and had permission to, whether it be from others or ourselves, to just share our gifts, share our passions, share our ideals, and share our true self. This world would be a much different and better place. Today is a new day. I am Nikki G, your host. Welcome to the Lone Doctrine, a safe space to bridge the gap between your authentic self and your mental health. We are your food for thought exploration station in order to make today better than yesterday. Hello and welcome to another month where we choose a topic to explore to help us develop ourselves. Now, our deepest selves, our real selves. We've been talking about expectations. We've been talking about having to make the necessary changes, especially with this last year where the world has been in turmoil. Now more than ever, we should have gained the perspective that we only get one life and we should make the best of it in the best ways possible. Now, life isn't always perfect. Our path isn't always perfect, but the imperfections can lead us to the perfection of life. It's when we set up camp in this negative mindset, in this negative perspective, that sends us on a vicious cycle of possibly having hardships be harder or just living in this lack, in this down feeling. So we're kind of digging to the root of everything to help us lift each other up and to lift ourselves up. So last time we talked about expectations and we talked about literally throwing them to the wayside and evaluating your life in a way where we can release these constraints that the world puts on us and we can find our true selves and our true happiness, which inevitably leads us to the most important thing, which is our peace of mind. So the topic for this month is branching off of that. It's the idea of identity. When we're born with the purest identity. It's as we grow that we get just hit left and right with these ideals and expectations of what we should be or who we are. But sometimes, ironically, if you look at the large scope of life, we have such this pure essence of who we are as a child because everything is just, it is what it is. We like what we like. We feel what we feel. And it isn't until our society, our culture, our friends, our family, our schools start telling us otherwise that then we start to question who we are. Now, on one side, this could be a negative thing, but on the other side, sometimes we do cross paths with people, mentors, friends, educators that help us to find our more authentic self. But a lot of times, it's very clouded. It's very muddy. So I wanted to take this month to really, really dig in deep to the tools that we can gain to really not only find ourselves, but to keep within the authenticity of ourselves throughout our whole life in the many different chapters we're going to go through. So let's take it down to the basics. What is identity? Identity, according to the dictionary, is the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. Now, that's very general. We as human beings are quite complex, and I mean that in a really good way. We are made of many parts, but sometimes we get isolated into this box, or we get pushed to the point where we have to feel like we have to fit in somewhere instead of just letting us be. Think of how different the world would be if we all were able and nurtured and had permission to, whether it be from others or ourselves, to just share our gifts, share our passions, share our ideals, and share our true self. This world would be a much different and better place. I really feel that you are important. You are here and you are important. No matter how you identify, you are important. And so I want to keep digging into this idea of when we start thinking about who we are and our identity and breaking down the points where it makes us feel not worthy, where it makes us feel like an outcast, where it makes us feel like we shouldn't be here or we're doing something wrong. So let's explore a little bit more. I found this idea of what identity is on futurelearn.com. What is identity? Identity is closely related to the social groups that we all live in. It is an essential part of the human condition that we have a sense of self and sense of who we are. It is how we express ourselves. Our identity provides us with our understanding of our place in this world. Now, there's an idea that you can break it down even further with this idea of identity being these two things, according to Dr. Sam. One, those aspects that give us our uniqueness in respect to others, and our social identity, as Sam explains, what I have in common, what I share with other people, and also what I have different, not from other individuals, but from other groups. We all carry with us a wide range of identities. Now, many people have really great studies around what identity means, and I love to explore because I know, and I will be the first to admit, I do not know everything. But what I do have is the willingness and this really weird passion and drive to figure out what makes us tick. So, when I share these things with you, I want you to keep an open mind because this isn't the end all be all. And life isn't just black or white or this or that. It is a full spectrum of colors. It's a full spectrum of feelings. It's a full spectrum of life. And there's so much goodness in the diversity that life has. So when you're listening to this, if you resonate with something, I encourage you to dig into that a little deeper because there's a reason that's resonating with you and may not resonate with someone else. So as we go through these things, remember, just keep an open mind because these people are also exploring the idea of identity and we're slowly figuring out how to make sense of this human mind, which I feel we've barely tapped the surface and there's so much more we're unaware of. So the exploration of it is pretty exciting. So let's dig in. I found this study called the Big 8 Identities. The Big 8 comprises 8 of the major identities that help us understand parts of who we are and where we come from. While this list is all-encompassing, it gives us an opportunity to explore some of our social group memberships, many but not all, of which we are born into. Understanding who we are and who others are helps us honor human dignity and create authentic, inclusive spaces. So let's just go over them real fast. Here's the 8. Age, ability, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socio-economic status, and religion. That's a big one. Now, this is not a religious podcast, but sometimes we do talk about religion because religion is very, very common in a lot of people's lives. And sometimes it can lead us in the best of directions, and sometimes the human's translation can get lost and not lead us in the greatest directions. So let's go back to the big 8. Age. This identity is about how people are categorized by society's perceptions of different age groups. For example, college students may be referred to as kids, despite technically being adults, and may be dismissed because of assumptions about this group's maturity level and capability. Older adults may also be discriminated against in employment or may be treated as children even though they are older, but they are aging. So age comes into many different things. Whether you're a college student, whether you're an older student, whether you're a young teen, whether you're a child, we categorize these people based on their age to have one subset of what their identity might be like. Ability. This part of the idea of identity is about the diverse array of differences in physical, mental, cognitive, developmental, learning, emotional makeup. It also includes mental health and the impact of social experiences such as trauma and surviving abuse. Those things are very, very important to somebody's identity because those are all the little facets that make us who we are. Here's another one, race, which I wish didn't have to be part of the identity. This identity refers to the concept used to classify humans based on perceived physical characteristics, such as skin color, eye shape and color, hair texture, body shape and size, and other physical features. I will take a side note that I hope one day so many of these things that we consider identity are seen as what paints the picture to a beautiful human being and not the division we've created in this world depending on the color of your skin, the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, which mine most of the time is purple, and to not prejudge people because of that. And I just want to make a side note. I just want to drop a little drop in the bucket and remind us that people are made of many, many, many parts inside and out. Okay, let's go to the next one. Ethnicity. While race classifies people based on perceived physical characteristics, ethnicity relates more to cultures such as sharing a common language, ancestry, national origin, and or a variety of cultural beliefs. Even a culture, you might be thinking like just really deep cultures, the Asian culture, the Native American culture, all of these cultures that have very clear traditions that have lasted hundreds and hundreds of years. But sometimes our culture just ends up being our home, is being our family, is being the traditions that are brought on through generation and generation that we carry on. So don't be misconceived by needing necessarily this authentically rich textbook historical path because we all have it, whether it's written in the movies or not. So remember that is a big influence in your identity. And how about gender? Which we'll get into more and more and more, the difference between gender and sex, because that's a big misconception in the world of the LGBT community because the spectrum is large, but we'll leave that topic for another month. In general, a person's deep-seated felt sense of who they are, gender, is different from sex, in that sex is generally identified with one's anatomy. Example of sex are female, male, intersex, having a combination of female and male parts. An example of gender includes people whose gender identity matches the gender or sex assigned at birth, transgender, people who identify differently than designated at birth, non-binary, those who do not identify as the binary of man or woman in relation to society's definitions and instead view gender as less fixed. Gender queer, a person who may not identify with or express themselves with a gender binary, and many, many, many more. Because of these varying gender identities, individuals may identify with a variety of gender pronouns that cannot be known by looking at someone, such as she, her, hers, he, him, his, they, them, theirs, and many more pronouns. And when you look at these, you might find yourself fitting into lots of different ones. Now, I am not the biggest fan of labels, but I am a fan of really finding peace with who you are. So if these labels help you identify yourself and they help you feel more authentic, then I'm all for it. But it's okay that many parts of you might fit in many different types of descriptions of what gender is. that is okay because there's a fluidity when it comes to gender identity. Now, another thing with identity in the big A is sexual orientation. A person's sexual, emotional, romantic, and or affectional attractions not necessarily dependent on behavior. Examples of identity include heterosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual, people who are attracted to people of two genders, pansexual, a term referring to the potential for attractions or love towards people of all gender identities and sexes, asexual, people who either do not feel sexual attraction or do not desire for sexual partners. Some asexual individuals may have romantic attractions, but nothing more. And queer, a self-identification for a person whose gender identity, expression, and or sexual orientation does not conform to societal categories. And again, so many more. Heterosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, queer. Who are you? Use this part as the many parts that make you you and be proud. And be okay that sometimes, again, it has that fluidity. Gender can have fluidity, as can sexual orientation. And let's do two more. Socio-Economic Status. This category is commonly conceptualized as one's social standing in society based on income, wealth, or poverty. It is often used interchangeably with social class, but social class includes additional factors such as the combination of education, income, occupation, lifestyle, and family background. That's a big thing. Think about it. How many times have you met someone new and one of the first questions when getting to know them is, oh, so where are you from? Oh, so where do you work? Oh, so what's your career? Oh, what do you do? What's your passions? We're already trying to identify somebody off of those things. That, again, is just a very small part of what makes a human whole. And last but not least, religion. This identity category relates to a person's or a group's beliefs about the existence of God or gods and an identification with a particular religion or set of spiritual practices. For example, a person may identify with one of the major world religions. Now, that might be confusing. For those of you who knows atheism, is that how you say it? Atheist? It's the non-religion. But what they mean by this identity is less of religion and more of just this spiritual idea that there's something more and something bigger or something higher. I believe that we do not know everything. It's impossible. Who knows if they're only like living thing out here in space? We could go on and on and on and on and on. And I'm sure a lot of people would like to argue about it. But I'm not here to argue with you. I am just saying that whatever your spiritual path is, however you define it, whether it be the very traditional church-like religion or whether it be just the gathering of friends and lifting one another up and encouraging each other towards a better life, that's a spiritual calling in a sense that we're trying to make the best of this life and we're trying to make those unknowns and those unanswered whys make more sense. Because there's so much beauty and mystery in the world that finding our authentic selves and being to share that with the world is more important than you may realize. And even though so many people are pushing, the world is always putting pressure, ironically, on each other to identify yourself through many different facets in many different ways. I want to encourage you that all of these pieces of the puzzle come together so perfectly when they're truthful, authentic, and nurtured. When we're searching for who we are or when we've lost who we are and we're trying to find that new us, that new you, be gentle with yourself. We go through many, many different chapters, and this idea of identity constantly changes. Sure, you may still have the things you loved as a child and the values you've set with your family. They may continue throughout your whole life. But if you really, really step back and look, things are always changing. Change is the one thing that's guaranteed. So be gentle and most importantly, keep fighting the good